Hello, everybody. Not good to see you again, but I feel like I had to do one more of these before tomorrow morning with the CEO speaking before the market opens. So let's get right into it. Yeah, there's no BristolMeyers refuted the jet thing. Investor relations told someone that that's not true. So forget about that. Here's the thing. You can't own this CVR. I don't own the CVR because I think they're going to be able to physically inspect Houston in the next 6 weeks. I've said this a lot over the last 6 weeks or last 2 weeks, and there's no reason why the FDA can go from a health perspective between now and the end of the year if they couldn't go from a health perspective the last 4 weeks. So I'm not expecting the CEO to say that there's a scheduled inspection tomorrow. That doesn't really make any sense to me. You can only own the CVR for two reasons. One, you think that the FDA is going to somehow do a virtual inspection between now and the end of the year, despite the fact that they didn't do a virtual inspection in the last 6 weeks. And what would be the reason why they would decide to now do one when they didn't do one in the last 6 weeks? That's one reason to own it. And the second reason to own it is for litigation or for believing that BristolMeyers will try to avert litigation and offer you something, not $9, but something in exchange for this worthless piece of paper come December 31st. It's at like 88 cents. Over the course of the day, it's gotten lower and lower as the day's gone on. You have to assume that investor relations is telling people that it's much more likely than not we hear a funeral tomorrow as opposed to good news, okay? The question is, what does that funeral sound like? There's a few different things he could say. He could say no comment. They've never really said no comment. They usually always say something that blows the CVR up. So, most likely he'll say nothing is scheduled. But if he says nothing's scheduled, will he have a caveat that says we're working with the FDA on possible virtual inspections? Probably unlikely he would say that, but it's also hard to imagine that if he said nothing's scheduled, and if he says nothing's scheduled, and there is something in the works with virtual inspections, I think that goes contrary to each other. So I don't know, I don't know. What I do know is that the BristolMeyers could have killed the CVR yesterday in that press release, and they didn't kill it. They could have used much more strong language when it comes to whether they think they can get this done by the end of the year or whether or not an inspection scheduled. I was told by someone that spoke to someone who spoke to BristolMeyers Investor Relations that we shouldn't read into the fact that the language isn't in there about no scheduled inspection. We shouldn't infer anything. So I think she was insinuating that there's probably still no scheduled inspection. But again, there makes no logical sense why they would be able to go to Houston this week, but they didn't go to Houston 2 weeks ago. They've already missed the PDUFA date. So that's where I am with this. I've seen some very peculiar things on Twitter from this happens all the time on Twitter. People that like to stick their necks out and either treat their positions or trade. This is exactly why I have a locked account, and I don't usually do things like this. When you get it wrong or it goes against you, you have people coming out and dancing on your graves. So I just want to address one of them, and basically it was insinuating that no matter what's happened every step of this turn, I've somehow spun it into good news and, net refusing to see the truth behind what's going on. And, that is the most preposterous thing ever. For instance, right before this last blow up, this was $3.50 because we found out that they did inspect Bothell, and in the extremely unlikely scenario, they would send someone into Bothell, but they wouldn't have a plan to send someone into Houston, the CVR would blow up. And guess what? The CVR blew up on that unique outcome. But everything else has played well. Ozanimod was approved. They got the RTF and they refiled it, and the refiling was accepted. They inspected Bothell. So, 10 things had to go right, 10 out of 10 things, and we might get 9 out of 10 of them. And then in that case, it's either a 0 or there's going to be, real litigation value. But to say that there's been some sort of thesis drift, the closest there could be a thesis drift is I thought there was a 51% chance yesterday that they would be approved on time. 51% is hardly 90%. And I thought there was a 41%, a 39% chance, can't do math, 41% chance it gets deferred and a 10% chance there's a CRL. Well, the CRL is off the table, and unless they fail the Houston inspection. And I look at where the stock price is, and I try to figure out what I should be doing here. Do I buy? Do I hold? Do I sell? And I try to look at it as a unique situation each time. Sometimes your psychology gets in the way of you, but that's what I'm doing here. So for me, at 88 cents or 90 cents, I'm willing to see how this plays out. I think it's vastly more likely that they don't get this done by the end of the year. If they get it done by the end of the year, there's probably a 20% chance to get done by the end of the year. But if I'm paying 50 cents or 40 cents for that 20%, when I also think that you have a lock with I to sell after the fact, I like those odds. I think this is worth. I think this ends at around 50 cents, whether it's not approved by the end of the year or they halted, or they delisted, or whatever. Because I do feel there's litigation value here, and I could see BristolMeyers doing some form of exchange or tender offer at a much discounted price, just to get the litigation resolved quickly, so that they don't have to deal with the headache of potentially paying $9, have to do discovery, have to figure out why they got a major amendment when BristolMeyers never gets major amendments, why they got an RTF and they never get RTFs. Maybe emails get discovered. I don't think they did anything nefarious, but they clearly dropped the ball with regarding both filings, or else they wouldn't have gotten a major amendment and they wouldn't have gotten the RTF. So it's a lot of money at stake. So you'll definitely have people that are willing to finance it and see how far they can go with litigation. IR telling us shouldn't infer anything about the language. Sounds like there's nothing scheduled, and that's bad. There's definitely nothing scheduled. I mean, I don't know why, in what world would the FDA miss a PDUFA date because of health reasons and COVID, and then now send in someone to inspect in Houston when COVID's worse than it was in the last 6 weeks. What could happen, and again, there's not high odds of it happening, is that either they are getting better at virtual inspections, or they've changed their mind and they couldn't get it done in time for the PDUFA date. So, they'll do it shortly after. Now, going against that is in BristolMeyers, press release, it didn't say the word weeks. Like I said, I was hoping to see if I wanted to be positive on a deferral. They said the FDA has not given a new date. We knew the FDA wasn't going to give a new date because they already gave one extension, and you can't give another 3-month major amendment after you've already given one. So there was never going to be a new PDUFA date, but they could have said, we hope to get this done the next few weeks. They didn't say that. It seems pretty clear from the press release that they couldn't inspect due to travel restrictions, which basically means they want to do a physical inspection. This CVR is likely dead. Yes, Rodano, it's trading 88 cents. So the market is telling you that it is most likely dead. That's, there's not some sort of hidden value here, because there's something that we're not talking about that's happening right now behind the scenes. It would have to be some sort of a virtual inspection, which clearly they weren't comfortable doing it earlier, and you'd have to be comfortable with them doing it now. What's up with the BAML Bank of America note at 60 to 70% odds by the end of the year? So I thought that was really bullish, and then my friend emailed the analyst, and at that time he hadn't even spoken to the company. So if he hadn't spoken to the company, I don't know how he could be at 60 to 70% odds by the end of the year. I mean, I think he just pulled it out of his tuchus. So I wouldn't really say much there either. What else did I want to address? What is a review cycle? A review cycle is when you submit your application and you get a PDUFA date, and when the PDUFA date comes due, you get a decision usually, and that's the review cycle. And you can extend it once up to 3 months for a major amendment if there's a reason to extend it. COVID isn't a reason to extend it. They extended it for another reason. We don't know what it is. There were some deficiencies in the CMC portion of the package, is what people say. So they couldn't inspect during the current review cycle is a factual statement. That means as of yesterday, they hadn't inspected. Doesn't mean they can inspect after the review cycle, but they had to tell you that the PDUFA elapsed. Do you think this trades up if when FDA issues guidance on remote assessment? Seems like that was coming soon. It's only 6 weeks, So I don't know. How do they decide which companies can have a remote assessment? I don't know how they're making those decisions. I would think that this would qualify since, it's mission critical and they send people into Bothell, but I don't know how you handicap that. Anybody else? No reason to make this long. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing from me. According to a friend at the FDA, they won't accept outside help in the form of private flight or hazmat suit. So even that long shot is dead too, even though I had it at less than 0.1% for them to help. I mean, okay. We spoke to a guy at Pfizer that said they've sent planes for the FDA when they couldn't get to certain places. This is back in like the Ebola days. But I wasn't, if there was going to be a private plane being sent for them to Houston, probably would have already happened already. Do you think litigation would take years like Sanofi Genzyme? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they would much rather do something quick and do it much less than $9, whether it's $1 or $2, $3. I don't know. But I don't know. The virtual conference that may change your mind or make you more bullish. I have a friend that's on the virtual conference today. I'm not expecting him to glean much from that, but maybe. What are you looking to hear from the CEO? Well, look, they can put an end to this pretty much immediately tomorrow if they wanted to. If the CEO says that there's no inspection scheduled and does not comment or shoots down the idea of a virtual inspection, the market's going to think that there's no chance of this happening by the end of tomorrow. So, by the end of December. Because there's nothing logical how you can draw that conclusion. If they weren't able to inspect the last 6 weeks in a heavy COVID, why would they be able to inspect for the next 6 weeks? If he just says no comment, that would be bullish. Usually they like to tell us bad things. If they're actually deep in the conversation with the FDA, he can tell us that they're currently in discussions with the FDA. And if there's any update, they'll let us know. That would be bullish because it would insinuate that they're talking about virtual inspections. The reason why IR has not said what the update will be. I think people just inferred there will be an update tomorrow. And it makes sense because that's when they do these things. That's when they say things like no inspection scheduled, which again, I would very much expect to hear no inspection scheduled tomorrow. Though I find that Otto wasn't in the press release yesterday. Does BMY have the ability to purchasing shares in the cheap to help hedge their costs of the CVRs being bad? No, they're completely restricted on it because they have material non-public information. They know everything. They know they always know when inspections are scheduled. They know what the conversation with the FDA regarding whether they are open to virtual inspections. They have information about the IDACEL, about how that review is going. So no, they're not allowed to buy in the open market. Any other questions? Seems like every drug getting delayed or CRL'd. Is there policy that only COVID drug EUAs will be addressed until COVID goes away? That is effed in the head. The FDA would probably tell you that the CRLs were unrelated to COVID and they would have CRL'd those drugs anyway. The pushback against that is some of the CRLs are manufacturing related and they probably were inspected or virtually inspected late in the game. And maybe they would have been able to fix the manufacturing problems if they didn't have such a tight time frame. With the vaccines looming, it's very likely that the FDA officials get vaccinated in January or in the end of December even, which means that once they're vaccinated, you think that they would be okay with going and doing inspections. So it shouldn't be an indefinite delay. It's just a very, very poorly timed delay for us. And when the story's written on this, it won't be that BristolMeyers, fucked us. It'll be that COVID fucked us. And I never thought in my wildest dreams back in March that I think I said to a friend back in March, I said, if they can't inspect Lysocell by December 31st, then we have bigger problems to deal with. And you know what? It's funny. It turned out to be true. COVID's rampant and 2020 has been canceled. And I'm shocked the stock market's not down, much more than it is. So I did not think COVID would be here with us for the whole year, or at least I thought we would have a way to handle it better, like other countries or some other countries have done. So that was the thesis killer, or that will be the thesis killer. But It ain't over till she sings. And it's not gonna. It would take a lot for me to sell at this point because honestly, the CVR has always traded materially underpriced since day one. So in my mind, tomorrow if he says something negative and it goes to 25 cents, I think it's worth 75 cents or $1 for litigation. So it's like I'm not going anywhere. I don't need tax loss. So if you need a tax loss, then that's a whole other issue. Thanks for all your work on this. You're welcome. I'm sorry it didn't work out better. Why wouldn't they have said no scheduled inspections in press release yesterday? I don't know. They're cruel. I can't come around why they wouldn't have been more forceful in the press release. Like, why do you need the CEO to say it in a conference, call verbally? Why wouldn't you have put in that press release? Currently, there's no scheduled inspections, and we think it's unlikely. It's very possible nothing will happen by the end of the year. They left all that out. So it's all for legal reasons, but I don't know why that you'd have to leave that out for legal reasons. They had no problem putting in the 10Q that nothing was been scheduled. So I don't really read into anything about that. I mean, I think if they were planning on inspecting this week or next week, the language in the press release would have been probably a little bit better and about timeframes. I can tell you this: two of the people that spoke to investor relations, one of them was a friend and said he thought that they were more upbeat than they usually are. A friend of a friend, and that's odd. And then in Salim's note this morning, he wrote, and I quote, he wrote, the tone, BMY hasn't given up. Tone of the call was not defeatist. Now, of course, they can't give up. If they give up, then they get sued for giving up. But that doesn't mean that they have to be upbeat, right? So what does that all mean? I have no idea. I have no idea. I would think FDA has a plan on how to proceed forward, schedule. Do they have a plan? They're a bureaucratic organization. They might think there's 2 other drugs on the market already, and this isn't a rush. I, of course, disagree, especially because this can be given in potentially an outpatient setting and has a differentiated safety profile. So you're making people go into hospitals and ICUs that have to be treated for these side effects when Lysocell could, in theory, or not in theory, and the numbers show it, could keep them out of the hospital and keep them out of the ICU. So the FDA should know this, but it's disappointing. But he said they would update us on the call, right? The CEO Cafario has to update us with news in the last earnings call. He can't put out a PR and be silent on it being totally dead while knowing. They would update us, I think, if it was approved, rejected, or delayed. I think is his point. I don't know. I think by them not saying it's not scheduled is them inferring that maybe it's just the way it was in the past. You should definitely bank on it not being scheduled. Why would it be scheduled? I mean, what would have happened in the last 2 weeks that would be different in the next 2 weeks? It would basically, you'd have to think that there's an employee the FDA has that has changed their mind, that said, I wasn't willing to take the risk for inspections in Houston, but now I'm going to do it, for whatever reason. Maybe he got paid $1 million by a hedge fund, and now he's going to go. So if you believe that, then yeah, they can inspect, but they can't. FDA can't force any of its employees to inspect. Why doesn't someone ask BMY CEO tomorrow why the company has any confidence that an inspection of Texas facility could happen in time to make the milestone date? Also, are you sending a PI to Houston? I never sent the PI to anywhere. That wasn't me. That was somebody else. I have no idea what they're doing. I don't think they're doing that. I think we all are under the conclusion that a physical inspection in Houston is rather unlikely. I think the company would say, we have no way to predict whether the FDA can inspect by the end of the year. I don't think they would go out of their way to say, no, we think we'll miss the date. But I did think that there'd be more serious risk language in that press release than there was. FDA could have changed in the sense that they wanted to wait a couple weeks near PDUFA to see if it died down in Texas. But now that hasn't happened and the PDUFA passed, they want to approve so virtual. Yeah, that would be the bull case, and also get it done by year end, which is a lot less important than getting it done by the PDUFA. Look, if you know any journalists, this is a good story, right? It's the first breakthrough designation drug that's missed its PDUFA date due to COVID because they can't go to Houston. I emailed 2 journalists, and the story's even better with the $7 billion payout that BristolMeyers won't have to make by the end of the year if they don't approve it. But it's as good as any story I've read in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, the Washington Post recently. So I would love to hear FDA's conclusion why they can't either A, waive the Houston inspection, B, do it virtually, or C, send somebody in there when millions of people are putting their life in the lines as frontline workers. So seems others have just gotten a CRL. How often are deferrals given by the FDA? I think there's been 2 other deferrals. One's because of a South Korean plant, and another was because it's a Botox drug. So I don't think the FDA is rushing to approve either of those anytime soon. You would hope here is that because this is a breakthrough designation drug and it actually fits mission critical according to what the guidance they gave in August, that they try to get this through to cause less embarrassment to the agency. Journalists in biotech space are typically FDA psychophants. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about like journalists that are on Twitter. Could BMY change the CVR deadline because of the extenuating COVID circumstances? They could, but I don't think that they would want to. And actually, I'll get to that in a second. This next question is even more sad. Hey, Matt, I'm a healthcare worker, and I saw a patient last week who was hospitalized with relapsing DLBCL. Disappointed to think that Lysocell could help him, and it was being delayed for silly reasons. That's very sad. Could BMY change the CVR deadline because of extenuating circumstances? BMY's core constituency is its shareholders, its common shareholders. It has no fiduciary duty to the CVR holders. It wants to pay 0, period. Full stop. If they can pay anything, they want to pay 0 because that's all they care about is their common shareholders. Okay. Where it gets complicated is if they are liable for having the major amendment, which delayed this, and potentially if the judge, thinks that COVID was an extenuating circumstance, given that it defeats the intent of the CVR, which the intent was that these 3 drugs get approved on time because of their clinical profiles and manufacturing profiles, not because there's an extenuating circumstance like COVID that delays it. There's no force majeure clause in the contract. So, that's what that is, acts of God. It's hard. You can't really prove that. That's not in the contract. But you don't know what a judge can do. You don't know what litigation could uncover. It's more likely, I would think, that come December 31st or leading up to it, Bristol, again, this is not likely, but it's more likely that they would exchange the CVR for another CVR, a new one. Instead of $9, you get $4.50. And the deadline's December 31st, 2022 kind of thing. And, if IDACEL gets CRL, then you don't get anything. That way, they're doing what's right for their shareholders by paying less money, and they eliminate all litigation. And then the final win is they give some money to their employees, which own these CVRs. Usually the employees don't own any CVRs. They're going to like an outgoing, biotech's shareholders, and it's a small little biotech that's been acquired, and maybe, a handful of them are going to join the new company. So that's not the case here. It's thousands. What incentives does FDA have to inspect before 12/30? Only 2 incentives. The first incentive is that the FDA does like to trumpet how many approvals they have in a given year. And so the calendar year matters from that perspective. The second reason is at some point, this is going to be in papers. How many months can go by before a life-saving drug is just sitting idle because the FDA refuses to virtually inspect or send somebody into a Houston facility? It's bad luck. So that was always my thesis, and it's wrong. We got to the PDUFA date and they did not defer. They deferred, right? They didn't approve on time. So you can officially say that my thesis has been bunked, right? We didn't get approved on time, which I thought would happen. I think the not inspecting due to travel limitations is BS, but this is part of the guidebook as a valid reason to defer. Yeah, they say they have some sort of internal algorithm. They don't say algorithm, but deciding based on a risk of the facility, risk of the facility, risk of the state, risk of the county, and then how important the drug is. Under that scenario where CVR is exchanged, couldn't shareholders sue for that payout? Contract is clear; they may object to that. Yeah, someone said that to me. They wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You can still sue. So the way it would work is, if December 31st they wanted to change the terms, they would offer you a tender offer to swap your CVRs for the other CVR. If you don't want to swap, you're more than happy to sue them for the $9. Does that make sense? How much is BMS willing to sacrifice Lysocell to save $7 billion? I don't think that they're going to have to sacrifice it. I mean, they're going to get their cake and eat it too. This is going to be approved in January or February probably, because the FDA is going to get vaccinated at the end of December and maybe January, and then they should be able to go physically inspect Houston shortly after. So they're going to get both. New CVR seems unlikely. A scenario you get after a CVR holder negotiates with themselves. Scenario you get after CVR holder. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, wouldn't shareholders sue the company if they pay out anything to CVR? No, it would be under the pretense. Did the shareholders sue, the other litigation when they settled, the Genzyme CVR? No, because it was in the, and the shareholder lawsuits all the time. So sure, there could be a shareholder lawsuit against BMY Common, and they'd have to say we did it was in the best interest of our shareholders because we didn't want to have costly title litigation related to COVID and relating to a major amendment. Either way, they're getting sued. So they're going to get sued from either for $9 from the CVR holders, or they're going to get sued from the BMY Common holders for changing the terms in some manner. Yeah. Anything else? All right. I'm sure I'll be on here again tomorrow to talk about what the CEO says. But here, reality check. The government has been forcibly adamant about our kids going to school. It seems crazy if you just step back and assess this. Yep, sure does. Anyway, sorry again, everybody. I hate this. I don't like the losses, and I don't like. It's more fun doing this when things are going well. And we'll see tomorrow. Like I said, I'm not expecting anything positive. If it's worthwhile to talk about it after he talks, I'll come on, and we'll probably just be in a waiting game until the end of the year, is my guess. All right, everybody, take care.